think another thing that made me stand out was enthusiasm. And I always encourage young people to be very enthusiastic, because when you're enthusiastic about something, you're really showing up with 10,000%, and you're raising everyone's energy. For me, what is the thing that I instinctively try to do in every situation I'm in? I try to make people feel included. I try to broaden the landscape and, bring in more ideas. For your listeners and everyone trying, to be a grown-up, to understand that the foundations there are to know yourself. I cannot.
Welcome to this episode of A Beginner's Guide to Being a Grown-Up. Today we have the absolutely fabulous Aishah Ahmad with us. Now, Aishah is a legend, I think. She does lots of financial inclusion. She is involved in the Big Sister programme, and she was the first woman to be a deputy governor for the Central Bank of Nigeria, looking after financial stability. So I'm sure we're going to get into some of that and how her journey through life and working in banking and what she does now and how she came to it. So Aishah, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Sam. So nice to be here to talk to your listeners.
Excellent. And I'm really looking forward to them learning a little bit more about your life. So the first question I want to ask you is very broad, just to tell us a little bit about your journey into adulthood.
First of all, Sam, I want to say what an amazing privilege it is to be on your platform. I think for any professional that has had a long career as I have had, you're always looking for opportunities to share what you've learned over the years, because as you grow, as you hit each milestone, as you achieve your dreams, you sort of tend to forget where you came from. So I'm really, really pleased to be here. I'm a finance person, so let's just say that I've worked in both the private sector, as a private wealth manager, as a retail banker. I did some commercial banking, and then ended up on the policy side as the Deputy Governor for Financial Stability at the Central Bank of Nigeria. Of course, there's a lot that has happened in between when I started and when I got to that point. I think one of my first roles actually was very interesting. That was the beginning of when digital and technology, started to become mainstream. And I worked as a teacher for teaching people computer skills when I first finished school. I did that for like 6 months before I went on to do something called the National Youth Service Corps. It's 1 year of working, more or less like working, not for the government, because you can work in private sector, but it's a way of sort of graduates giving back. You do an orientation in a camp where you're taught civil responsibility, where you're taught physical fitness, and things like that, preparing you for going into the life of work. And then you serve 1 year. Mostly you serve in government institutions. Maybe you teach rural areas, things like that. So for my youth corps, because I studied accounting, I worked for an accounting firm where I was an audit trainee, and that's really where I can say I really started work. And I think your audience would probably share the same experience, where when you first start work, you're not quite, you don't quite know what you want to do. You're not quite really into the work yet. You've not started to build that discipline, around, this is what I'm meant to do. And then you're green, wet behind the ears. People, you almost like, in my time, I had to fight for work. I had to fight for them to give me stuff because, most of your seniors are well established and they really don't have time to train you. Anyway, that was where I started. I think in that job I learned a lot about grit, a lot about keeping at it, long hours. Auditing is long hours. It's pouring over a lot of, records, and, you as the audit senior would have a selection, and then you have to go into these usually dusty places where you're coming up looking for those files, and for me it was like grunge work. And of course, starting out too, you're the one that does everything, every other extra thing, get coffee, get lunch, take my bag, all of those things. And you're thinking, I went to school. I actually went to school. I have a second-class upper degree in accounting. It is not meant for, running errands and all of that, but it serves to sort of build that humility in you, build that willingness to learn under others, because, whereas you were senior as a senior at the end of, uni, you're starting again and all of that. Anyway, from that job, I worked as a chief financial officer for a group of conglomerates, a conglomerate that had different interests. So it had construction, it had manufacturing, and sort of oil and gas, and I was helping to prepare reports, etc. And then I moved towns. Then all of this happened in the north, between Abuja and Minna, where our family home is. And then I moved to Lagos after I got married, and then in Lagos I started my banking career. I did my first master's degree. There's a lot to talk about because I have two master's degrees, but that was when I really started sort of entering the world of banking. I started as a treasury assistant. Again, I was doing callovers in the treasury department. I think from my early jobs, I learned what I didn't like, to do, because usually, as a young person starting out, it's okay not to know what you don't want to do, what you want to do. You can also learn what you want to do by elimination. And that's why I always encourage people to do. Yes, do a lot of things. Take on a lot of opportunities. Do all sorts of jobs. So for the work as an audit trainee, of course, my boss then, Mr. Wale Foloweshere, he was the one that taught me, how to stick on things. I remember there was one weekend we had an audit, and some work was left to be done, and then I had this wedding that I was going to another city for, and my friends were already there, and my whole mind was on that wedding, and I hadn't finished my work. And he was like, "You're finishing this work, whether you like it or not." They had gone ahead. I was still there. Imagine a Friday. Usually on Fridays, people work half days. 5:30, Aisha is still pouring over, and I hated this guy. And I was like, But it stuck with me about finishing things, about, delivering on what you're asked to do. But I learned from doing accounting that I wanted to be the one to create records for people to look at. And that was why I pivoted to finance. Because, accountants are more like historical looking, trying to, ensure that the financial statements are a true representation of what has happened in the past. I'm like, I want to make things happen, That was for that one. When I worked in sort of the CFO side, which was the business side, for me it was a little boring as well, because, I was like, because I studied accounting, the expectation was that I'll be a chartered accountant. But the truth is that you can study one thing and do something else, because what you do in uni is really to build those skills, to build the relationships, to build the ability to be resourceful, but you don't really necessarily need to work, where you're in. So I started doing treasury, and then I was doing callovers again, and I remember, Aisha, you're not very good at sort of operational, what would I call it, operational things. More what I'd call back office work. I soon realized that, I thrive best when I'm dealing with people. Even when I did the audits, I had more fun talking to other auditors, talking to the client people than I did looking through things. You know what I mean? So that from that treasury job, I then moved on, and that was when I got my first private wealth management role. And I was like a fish in water. It just took to me, and I took to it, I loved my clients. I didn't mind the targets. I loved making pitches. I loved the challenge, of the sort of, the expectations, and moved to other jobs. Then, as I grew more senior, one thing I know is that I always focus not on my position within the institution, if you know what I mean, but more about being the best I could be. So I don't know when I decided this, but I just decided once that, okay, I wanted to be the best private banker in the world. And so even though I was in Nigeria, sub-Saharan Africa, far away from the Coots of this world, I would always check, okay, what would Coots do? What does Coots give their clients? How do they approach things? And I think that made me stand out. I think another thing that made me stand out was enthusiasm. And I always encourage young people to be very enthusiastic, because when you're enthusiastic about something, you're really showing up with 10,000%, and you're raising everyone's energy in the room. And it's just like games. Like, you have to pick someone to be on your side. Everyone wants somebody that, is forward thinking, is positive, and, and all of that. And my deciding that I wanted to be the best private banker in the world made me hold myself to high standards. And it helped me, we're not all competing, but it helped me stand out amongst my peers, And so I really enjoyed it, and I found it very fulfilling. I was, getting rewarded for all the work I was doing, and also I had personal fulfillment from helping my clients, not just in terms of their financial strategies, but as you engage people, you become friends with them and their family, and then you become trusted advisor, and that was sort of what any private banker, what they sought in the world, wanted to be. It wasn't all finance, I must say. At some point I got involved with WIMBIZ, Women in Management, Business and Public Service. It was established in 2001 by an amazing group of women and one man. And their thinking then at the time was that they needed a platform that could advocate for women, women's leadership, women's economic empowerment, that could inspire women. I got involved right from the beginning, but during my banking career, I became more active, sort of in there, raising funds. Who would say they liked actually raising money, like going to people and saying, okay, so we have an event, but because I really enjoyed what I was doing, and I really enjoyed the cause I was speaking for, I didn't feel like, I was going cap in hand. So, I loved, all the planning, and then you can imagine working with an amazing group of women from different ages, different sectors, working on events, working on interventions and initiatives. Anyway, long story, I became the chairperson of the Executive Council. And during my time, I'm very proud that, I not only focus on inspiring others and being more inclusive. And when we'll talk later about why, because I was preparing for this and I was thinking, so what is the common thread, for me? What is the thing that I instinctively try to do in every situation I'm in? I try to make people feel included. I try to broaden the landscape and, bring in more ideas. I'm the kind of leader that would, we're sitting down, we're having a meeting, and I notice those that are not speaking, and I want to know what they think, kind of thing. Yeah. So I'm very glad that during my time, I sort of made it more diverse, bringing in more younger women, making it more nationally diverse, because the organization was based in Lagos, and I felt it was important that on the Executive Council we had broader representation in terms of location, and then of course also trying to make sure that we use technology. I started using things like Skype and all of that to sort of have conversations. This was way before COVID, and when COVID hit, of course, the organization was, found it easier and more seamless to really just flow with that. I think one of the initiatives that came up with during my time as chair was the Big Sister program that you mentioned. And what the Big Sister program does is it focuses on teenage girls in public secondary schools, and it's public for a reason. The whole idea is to go into these schools for a day of mentoring, and it's trying to achieve two things. Not just impact the girls, so we made sure that we had it in the 3 major languages in Nigeria. Also, we had things like goal setting, personal hygiene, financial plans, and all of that. So all of the other, so to speak, important life skills that girls would need. But the other side of it was I wanted the girls in those schools, so government schools, maybe more or less, more people there would probably be, more of those girls would be more from indigent backgrounds and lower socioeconomic backgrounds. I wanted them to have a vision of what a successful woman looks like. So we used as the mentors for the day, we used the women within the WIMBIZ network. Because I feel the most powerful message that can inspire a girl is to see another woman and say, I want to be like her. I want to sound like her. I want to do what she does. And sometimes without seeing something, you can't believe in it until you see it, And a secondary objective for me then was, I wanted people to see the state of education, to look at the state of the schools, because we're doing it physically. And so you go into these classrooms, there are no windows. Some of them have issues with potholes in the, space. Some of them have sanitary facilities that are not fit for purpose. And you may know from some of the work you and I do together around some of the things that hold girls back from going to school. Part of it is lack of sanitary facilities. So I'd hope that when, these successful women in private sector, public sector, and, come in, and entrepreneurs come into those spaces, they may be, inspired to contribute as well to fixing those schools. So that's the Big Sister program. WIMBIS continues to run it, and it has impacted, I think, about 7,000 to 8,000 girls thus far since it was started. WIMBIS has many other impactful programs, that look at, there's one called Winning Without Compromise, which is a program that is set in universities, and the whole idea is to build ethical leadership in university, female university attendees. There's a program called WIMBOARD, which is designed to get more women on boards, because that corporates are always saying, okay, we want women, we want diversity, but we can't find them. So it wasn't all finance. It was also that I was giving back in this way. And then one day, I got an opportunity to serve my country, at the Central Bank of Nigeria, as the deputy governor. For me, it's one of the biggest honors of my life. Being able to be in that kind of room where decisions are being made, policy decisions are being made that impact millions. Again, the things I focused on were around inclusion. It was very important to me that internally and across the financial industry, we put female empowerment as an important priority. And I'm very glad that I was able to get the bank's leadership, to take this on. Not just me as a deputy governor, there were 3 other deputy governors and a governor, but getting the whole leadership team aligned on this. And, every single year, we celebrated Women's Day with a significant event, and we involved everybody, and I'm so very proud of that. Proud of my financial inclusion work. I think it's very important that people operate in spaces where they thrive. I thrive where, we need to bring people together to achieve something that is big. Financial inclusion is big. Sam, all the benefits that comes out of making sure people are included,
Yeah.
Not just being self-determining, access to more finance that they can grow, it impacts families and all of that. So, financial inclusion strategy, I worked very closely with public sector, private sector, and what really helped, and that's the thing about experience, you must never underrate any experience you have, because it comes in, it all ties up. It later makes sense, when you look at it, because in that role, leading that strategy, my previous private sector experience came in very useful, because I knew how to bridge innovation and policy making and get everybody aligned together and get everybody excited about it. And that's why I cannot overemphasize really, really for your listeners and everyone trying, to be a grown-up, to understand that the foundations there are to know yourself. I cannot overemphasize it. It's more important to know yourself than, say, I was reading Seneca's book on the shortness of life, where there was a statement that said it's more important to know the workings of your mind than to know what's happening in the corn market, right? So education is important, but self-knowledge, because once you have self-knowledge, you can then operate in areas that bring out the best in you, because there will be challenges, as you walk along the road. But if you're working in an area you love, you become more resilient, you become more creative, you become able to think outside the box when those challenges arrive. So some of the work we did on financial inclusion, I found, personally fulfilling, not just because of the impact it would make, on the financially excluded in Nigeria, but also the synergy that we were getting between the financial institutions, the financial sector regulators like the CBN, the NDIC, the SEC, and think tanks. We had Lagos Business School helping us, and many other institutions, the fintechs, and just creating this ecosystem that is working together to achieve something that is big, and that was very important. And of course, I'm proud of the fact that despite the challenging economic environment, particularly during COVID, the financial system was stable and sound, and went through that. So
and that's huge.
One of the
right?
best, it is. That was one of the best privileges, sort of my life, doing that work, and also seeing how development works, also seeing how much opportunity that African countries have, to really get development working and to get growth, sustainable growth in. And it's simple but not easy, but with concerted effort and with your heart in the right place, something that can happen.
Awesome. And thank you for that. What an amazing journey you've had. And I think you've already pulled out some fantastic little nuggets of advice, so I'm sure the listeners would benefit from that. And I think that role modelling piece that you touched on is really important, that knowing yourself and knowing what you don't want to do, I think is really powerful.
Yeah.
So if we think back to your younger self, you're clearly very driven, financial inclusion is clearly important to you, delivering with that first boss telling you had to finish the thing you'd started.
Yeah.
What would if you went back to being your 18-year-old self, what would she recognise in you today?
I still have that sense of, I think people would say I'm a very friendly person. I'm really a people person. Like, I accept it. Okay, I'm a people person. That hasn't changed. I'm very happy that I still have my enthusiasm. And my enthusiasm is almost childish, childlike, because, when you're 25 and you have that kind of enthusiasm, it's expected. When you're
yes.
sort of after post 45 and you still have that, I think it's an advantage. I didn't always think it was an advantage, but I have to take my own medicine. So if I'm saying people should be themselves, then I accept that this is me. So she would recognize that enthusiasm, that warmth, and that quest. Because when I was younger, I was always thinking about the meaning of life. I like to ponder all of these really, really big issues. And I'm still thinking about it. And that should tell anyone that's trying to be a grown-up that you don't it's not one day that you become a grown-up. Yes, the age thing. So when you're 18, I think in most places when you're 18 you can vote. And I think when you're 16 you can drive, right? And so the society needs a way to classify people, right? But the truth is that this whole being an adult thing, we're all just trying.
Yeah.
And sometimes making it up as we go along. You know what I mean? But trial and error, and all that. So she would recognize that I remain that way, and I'm always learning. I want to know things. I'm really into history, and I don't know where I got that from. But anything old, anything 1,000 years old, I'm very interested in that. And as I get older, I'm trying to see how I can make that interest relevant today. And so maybe that may be, maybe you're the custodian of history, financial history, evolution of financial systems, ecosystems, because you do need to learn from the past for the future.
Yeah.
So that's what she would still recognize.
Excellent. And I love your enthusiasm. It absolutely is part of who you are. So here's maybe a slightly more difficult question. What would she be absolutely blown away by? So if she saw you now and she got to talk to you, what would she be like, oh my God, that's amazing? What would she be amazed by?
Well, I think sort of my trajectory, my leadership, I sort of grown into myself a bit. Because one thing she also had in her teens was not being sure of herself. Mm-hmm. I used to have these doubts, like I used to always think, for someone that's so enthusiastic outside, when it came to things that I thought about, and I think about the craziest, biggest things, my first instinct, no, that's not for me. I wouldn't get that. And then, I don't know about you, but I wasn't one of those teenage girls that was very sure of her looks. Mm-hmm. So I never really felt that, I was pretty. And, in those days, it was about that, who are the pretty ones, who are the shapely ones, who are the slim ones,
Yeah, being a teenage girl is hard.
Very, very hard. And you're comparing. And, today, because, I was thinking about it, the beginner's guide to being a grown-up today must always be contextual. Because my context then was there wasn't any internet to judge me even further.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, yes.
It's just the girls that I, went to school with and I saw and, all of that. And I can't imagine how today's young adults are dealing with that,
No, absolutely. I'm very glad I grew up.
Yes.
Before social
media. And resilience that you need, where you're being compared, effortlessly compared. Yeah. And that is why I cannot overemphasize that the person that you need to be most like is you, who you really want to be, because there's really no point. There are, 6 odd billion people on this planet? Very, very difficult to please, them and to cope with those standards, Yeah, so she'll be amazed at my trajectory. She'll be amazed that it's worked out. It's actually worked out, like... It's not perfect, but, it's come so far. I should be amazed at how resilient I can be and the kinds of things that I can overcome and then the kinds of things that I can, make come to life.
Thank you. And I think that resilience piece as we grow is so important. And I think you're right. I think, being a teenage girl is hard. I mean, I think it's probably harder now than it was when we were going through it, but it was hard then as well. And I think we all underestimate the resilience it takes, whoever we are and wherever we've grown up, to be successful and to continue to and be yourself. Have that confidence to be yourself. I think is so important.
Yes,
so
especially
on that journey.
I just want to say that, especially when you feel different.
Yes.
I think it's important I say this because I'm Nigerian, but I come from both sides. My mom's from the south and my dad's from the north, and it sounds simple, it's easy, but in when you're in different ecosystems or different contexts, you can sort of feel alone, and that's why I never felt like I quite fit in anywhere. And whilst that was a challenge, it taught me how to focus more on who I wanted to be. Right? So if you don't fit in anywhere, then you must fit in here. And it taught me to be more internally driven, and it taught me to then have standards that were beyond anywhere. And that's how, so anywhere you find yourself, even if you think you have disadvantages, you're not mainstream, you can make it work for you. And that's by connecting with who you truly are and what you want to live in the world. I just thought it was important to say.
I think that's so true, and I think there are very few people who actually feel like they fit in, even the ones that we look at and think that they think they fit in. When you actually peel back the onion of life, we find almost everybody feels insecure, lacks confidence, doesn't really know what they're doing, feels different from other people. Even if when other people look at them, we're like, well, obviously, you're successful and you came from this, and I think that, and I think and I love what you said about I felt different. I felt like I didn't fit in, so I had to fit in here, because what was the alternative? Is as I didn't fit in anywhere, and that absolutely makes you who you are.
It does.
So during that journey, there must have been struggles that you came across, kind of experience of rejection or failure. Can you tell me a bit about a time like when you've had to experience that, and how did you find that resilience to find a way through?
Good question. What you just said was powerful, and I just wanted to close on that conversation where you say everybody feels unsure. We all do, but I think we don't say it enough that we do.
No, agreed.
And so, if we don't say it, people can't see it because we're showing up resilient. We're showing up looking like we've got it all covered. One of the things I try to do for my team, all the teams I worked with, I, try to let them understand the things I struggle with. Because as a leader, you're on a journey as well, and there are things you're trying to improve. When I was in banking, yes, I loved banking a lot, but sometimes the pressure would get to me, and I'd be this, like, taskmaster, and I'm, like, on and on and on. And I knew that part of me didn't rub off well. And then some of my closest colleagues, I'd say to them, okay, just let me know when I'm doing it. And I think that gave them the permission to also be themselves. So as leaders, I just wanted to pivot on what you said, to say we do need to say it. Agreed. That we don't have it all covered. Okay, so failures. I think the first thing I feel that really, really got me, because, the thing is, you fail at things. There are many things I haven't gotten. There are many things I've applied for I didn't get. Jobs I applied for I didn't get. Applications I did that didn't go anywhere. And, sort of water off a duck's back. I think the one that I really felt, and that was tied to my self-concept, because coming up through school, it's so important the things people say to you. My teachers always said it. My mom, my dad, my family, everyone was like, okay, Shetu, that's what I was called when I was younger. Shetu is very intelligent. So my intelligence was like something I took with me everywhere. Like, I'm intelligent. Like, it's like a given. I'm intelligent. And then I decided I'm doing the CFA. I did level 1 of the CFA, which is Chartered Financial Analyst. It's a global certification for investment professionals. One of the things I dared to do. Of course, led by some mentors, and we'll talk about mentors if we have time. When I was through my banking career, there are people that have, that saw promise in me and told me, and were invested in my success, and that came from one of my mentors. Anyway, so I decided I'm doing this exam. It's notoriously difficult to pass. I think level 1 pass rate is something like maybe 30% or something low, wow. 20% and everything. So I passed this level 1, and I'm like, yeah. This is confirmed. She's smart. And then level 2 was a struggle. I failed level 2 twice. I wrote that exam 3 times. The first time I failed was a shock. I was my first shock. I'm like, what? And you need to understand, it's not just another exam you fail, because you put in 6 months of work to do the exam. This is 6 months of me denying, because I did it when I'd already had kids, denying myself family outings, not spending time with my kids, not spending time with my friends, focusing only on this thing. And in those days, you could only do the exam once a year. So it's almost like I lost my whole year. And on top of it, came out feeling like I was stupid. How couldn't I pass this thing? Kind of thing. So I think that was the first thing that hit me. And, I went on to pass it. I wanted to give up. Again, it was someone in my life that said, don't give up. I did level 3. I failed again. I did level 3 twice. In fact, when I failed the first time, level 3, my mom was even more upset than me. Because I actually took time off. No, as in this time around, normally you're like reading, but you're working as well. So you don't have enough time to leave time for practice questions. So I'm like, I'm going to do this better. I'm going to read and finish reading a month before. And then I went to see my mom in England and spent 1 month with her just doing practice questions. Now, what were my days like? I'm sitting down, I'm doing practice questions. 3 hours go like that. I remember because, in her house, there was this... There's this church somewhere in her house. I know those churches that they ring a bell every hour. Yeah. So I'm like looking, reading, and the next thing, the bell has gone off, and all she just come, bring me coffee, bring me tea, bring me food, pack it up. So she saw my dedication. I failed. My mom almost, you failed. I'm so sorry. Anyway, so the CFA taught me to believe in myself. It taught me to persist. Like I said, I had kids already. Of course, my sons were like 10 and 8 or something like that. And maybe they might not have known, but I'm like, if I give up, what will I tell my kids, about this? I was doing this for myself. And because I was already mid-career, so it's not like I was going to do the CFE and someone was going to promote me. But I wanted to prove to myself that if I pit myself against, not against, well, amongst other people around the world, I can come up okay, no matter where I started from, So that was it. I think what makes me get through my challenges and my failures is being truthful to myself. Like, you can lie to everybody else, but never lie to yourself. No, it's true. If it makes you feel better telling people things, that you don't believe, fine, go ahead, do that. But never lie. When you're talking to yourself, when you're thinking of your conscience, never lie to yourself, So I've been in situations where, in my career, navigating my career, unfavorable things have happened to me. Things that were not fair have happened to me. But even in those circumstances, when I think about it, I always find something I could have done better. And I take those things and I sit in it. When I say sit in it, I mean, there's one book I started writing. I've not finished it. I started writing in 2001. It's supposed to be a book to my sons. I saw it when I was sort of trying to reflect on this. And I was talking to them about failure, and I said to them that when you fail, you feel ashamed. You need to sit in the shame and feel the shame and let it get into your bones and really feel it. And then know that in spite of the shame, in spite of your mistake, in spite of anything you could have done wrong, you're worthy. And then you take that lesson, and then it helps your next, sojourn and your next opportunity. So I never lie to myself. I try to be reflective. I try to be honest, but in love. In that moment, yes, I'm not really giving myself enough to love, and I tend to hold myself to higher standards than others.
I think that's so powerful. I think that sitting in it and understanding it is really important. But what I'm getting for you is you're not judging yourself for the failure. You're sitting it to understand it. What was my part? What wasn't? What could I have done? When something comes up next time, how do I do stuff differently? And yes. that is it's such a grown up way of approaching failure, because as you say, failure's hard. Even if it's something that we think's outside of our control, we do feel ashamed if we fail, and we you can't learn anything if you never fail. Like you were saying with your exam, like if you'd never failed an exam, you wouldn't be who you are today.
You won't.
If you hadn't had to sit that exam 2-3 times, you wouldn't be the same person, because you wouldn't have had that experience, and it wouldn't have taught you that resilience, and to listen to the people who care about you and think about what your boys would have thought.
And the thing about the exam as well, I used to use it for my sons, and I used to tell them that it's less about your innate intelligence, but more about what you're willing to do with it. So that they know that it's not, you can't sit there and say, oh yeah, I'm smart. Mommy said so. Mom said so. And all these people that I've grown up with have always said I'm smart. Then don't study. And then you will see the feedback, as that. And you have to take responsibility. Being a grown-up, I was reflecting. I was like, what a wonderful idea Sam has put together. Because I don't think anyone really, we just learned by osmosis.
Oh yeah, we're all just making it up.
Yeah, this uncle, that uncle, mommy, sometimes that. Because, depends on the circumstances in which you grow. And adults were busy when we were growing up.
Yeah,
but
we are.
One of the fundamental things of being a grown-up is taking responsibility for yourself. Responsibility for your happiness, responsibility for your finances, responsibility for you, how you show up, who you are, and particularly for your self-concept. Because if you're waiting for someone to give you permission, waiting for someone to tell you you're good, you'll be waiting forever. Because everyone around you is looking for someone to tell them they're good. So you need to be your own cheerleader. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, so this leads me to a very good lead into the next question. So we all get given advice. Some good, some not so good. Some we want, some we don't want. But we don't always take the advice we're given. What is the best piece of advice you've been given that you ignored?
Okay, so I can't think of one specific situation, but there's something that I'm always told that it's taking me time to believe.
Okay.
To believe. I think that's it. So I talked about being reflective, being accountable, and all of that. You have to believe people when they tell you, particularly if they are people that you trust, and there are people that have no reason to make you feel good. Mm-hmm. You know, that sense of not being enough and all of that. And I know that women struggle with that, young women, women of all ages struggle with that. I wish I'd sooner listened to those bosses, those mentors, or those people that were much older that told me that I see a lot in you, I see greatness in you. It's almost like they would say it and you just water off a duck's back again, and I'm going back to doubting myself. Mm-hmm. So I wish I'd listened to that sooner, than I did. But specifically, I have an example from when I was much, much junior in my career. I was a young private banker. I had an opportunity to work in the Treasury Department. And for some reason, I was fixated on that label, private banker. Right? And I was being presented with an opportunity to broaden my skills, but I didn't take it. Mm-hmm. And, as I grew later, I thought, I could have taken this and I could have still been the best private banker if I wanted to. And so I think the lesson there is, especially when you're younger, when you're starting out, you need enough variety. Say yes to opportunities. Even if it's things that you haven't done before, and don't be too quick to label yourself this thing. So I'm this thing and I won't do this thing. Thankfully, this 21st century, digital first, interconnected world we are in says you can be many things. When we and I started, there was nothing like the gig economy. Just getting up and you're going to work. But yes, today there is, and I think that being a number of things at the same time is more recognized now. But I think any opportunity you have to broaden your skills, you should take.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I will include in that learning how to do a podcast, because that's something I've definitely had to learn to do. It's definitely, well, I'm not sure I've made it an art. I'm not sure how good I am at the art form, but I'm a work in progress. Let's call it that way.
I can tell you it's an art, Sam. And you know why? Because this was something we talked about this time last year. Mm-hmm. Remember, we got together and we had a conversation and we said, what are our goals? And you mentioned this, and I was so proud. Can't believe how proud I am when you did it. And now you're 12 episodes?
Yeah.
I can't keep up with you. So yes, you've gotten podcasting.
I remember that conversation. I think having someone else hold you accountable does help as well sometimes, I think. And I also, my team at work also, I told them about it and they were like, we're going to hold you accountable for this. And then we saw each other and I held you accountable for something and you held me accountable for something and we both did it. And I think that sometimes I think having an external body does help.
It does.
So we're I don't know how we've managed to get here so quickly, but we're at the final question for the podcast. So and I think I said this to you when we met, that actually I'd love to turn this into a book one day and pull together all of those great pieces of advice about being a grown-up. So what is the one thing that you would put into the beginner's guide to being a grown-up?
Wow. I think if I must pick one, I would pick loving, knowing, investing, and loving yourself. Because I think that is where everything rises and falls. It is you that you have to come back to when you fail. It is you that has to deliver in high pressure moments. It is you that has to be resilient when there's no place to go. It is you that has to choose yourself when the world decides to turn their back on you. I cannot overemphasize knowing, loving, choosing yourself. It's the most important thing, I feel, because in a world where you do have the tools, you do have the knowledge is ubiquitous today. There's so much you can get online if you want to. There's so many things you can get at this, click of a finger. The only thing perhaps holding anyone back is that self-belief. Can I do this? Is this me? Do I have permission to even dream big? So I think if I must pick one thing, that would be it. And along the same line, self-knowledge is not something that happens in isolation or one day. You just have, eureka, I suddenly know myself. And the 18 different traits that are Aishah Ahmad. It happens as you put yourself out there, having an action bias, because, some of the things that I didn't do as well from my own standard, because other people might think, you did so well, but they didn't know what plans I had. That's self-doubt. You need to conquer it. You need to act. You need to not care what people think. So that process of knowing yourself can also only happen if you put yourself out there in challenging situations, so that you can know your limit, know what you're good at, and you can learn from the things you need to. Because if you're not tested, what they say, woman is like what? A tea bag. When you put her in hot water, you know what she's made of. No hot water, we don't know what it's made of. We don't know what it tastes like, right? And then other things that I think are important, journaling. That process, journaling is so important. You don't have to do it every day. As a student of history, I think I know that all of the great kings and queens and leaders of the past journaled, and that's why we know we can put things in historical context. And I don't know, maybe it's something they taught them in King's School or Queen's School, because most of them did that. Like, for instance, reading Queen Victoria's journals, Prince Albert's journals, and some of the things they put in there. So you might not be able to have a daily journaling practice, but I tended to write when things were important. When I was younger, I'd write about negative experiences. Now, when I'm very, very happy, I capture the moment as well, and just say, I'm so happy now, and I say why I'm happy and put all the elements in there. But I think journaling is a way of talking to yourself, reflecting on yourself. And I think the most powerful thing about journaling is not when you, of course, it's cathartic when you write, because almost like you're releasing things. But I think it's most powerful when you look back.
Yes. And
see how far you've come, and look at the things you used to be concerned about. And somehow the process of learning, it just happens. It's no one knows when it actually happens. Like, all the things we learn, all the things we hear, no one really knows when it clicks. When you just wake up one day and find out that you're just now a wiser woman, a bolder woman, and all that. So journaling is important. I think something else I think is important is don't color too much within the lines. Sam, I don't know if that is an issue for you, because I think you spread your colors.
I'm not sure I've ever stayed in the lines, to be honest.
Yes, and you mustn't take that for granted, Sam, because for some of us, I was first children, I always I have to be good, because people looking at me, I have to take care of everyone. There's this, I'm sure you've heard it before, there's this quote, well-behaved women seldom make history.
Yep, I have that on a bag.
I love it. So I'm thinking, okay, Aisha, don't be well-behaved, because I'm thinking, oh God, what will happen? I did this. Everyone's going to be all right. Everyone's going to have breakfast. They're going to be okay. So don't be too concerned about what others think. I know it's easy to say, because we're all part of communities and we want to fit in, but the truth is that if you think about it, that they're also concerned what you think, then just do what you want. So don't color too much within the lines. Be okay to be a little weird. Yes, you may feel a little alone being a little weird, but
I love that.
Alone in yourself, in a place where you've created some peace, where you can go back to. Fine. And then, I know in today's world, not everybody, but I think more young people feel that parenting, they don't want parenting advice, and things like that. I feel, because I also had, like my dad he sort of felt he knew what we should be, and it always came from a place of love, but he was always trying to like protect us. Oh, you don't do this. I remember he didn't want my banking career at all. He just didn't like me going up and down, but I insisted and I did it. But I was still able to retain a good relationship with my dad. And growing up, I found out that I'm actually more like my dad.
We all turn into our parents, Aishah.
Yeah, because
turn into our parents.
Out of all his kids, I think but he probably, if you ask him when I was growing up, probably had a tougher time with me, because I'm the one that would say no. I'm the one that would want to push the boundaries, But today's youngsters, you can still think for yourself, listen to what parents have to say, but still retain a relationship with them and still do what you want. I think you need your family relationships.
Yeah.
I wouldn't lose that for anything. Yeah. Not just your parents, brother, family, aunties, uncles, people It's all life is about relationships. Relationships make things more exciting. Even when you achieve where you're going, you need people to share it with.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's one of the biggest, I think the two biggest investments I've made in myself is investing in my own education and my own development, and investing in my family relationships and general relationships. I think you can't underestimate that. Very important. And be kind and nice. People don't talk about courtesy anymore. No, really. So there was this book I bought for my son. He was 7. How to Be a Gentleman. There's actually a book like that. I'm sure there are many books like that. Little courtesies, thank you, please. Thinking of others. I think sometimes people feel if you're thinking of others today, it means you're not, I don't know, you're trying to be a sucker, or I don't know what the word is. But no, I think it shows you're evolved, and people tend to respect people that think about others, and you respect yourself more.
I think it goes back to what you were saying about you have to be true to yourself. And I think if family is important to you, your connections are important to you. And like you, my connections, my family and my friends are a really important part of who I am. And they're the ones who have always known you and will call you out. Because they know you really well. But I think, so many amazing pieces of advice, Aishah, thank you. So the things I'm going to leave us with are... be true to yourself, love yourself, like listen to yourself, because and don't lie to yourself. I thought that was amazing. That's so true, because if you're lying to yourself, right? Nobody else will know, but you will. And drive and don't give up, I think, has really clearly come across as well from your life story, and putting yourself and your family at the heart of what you do, and I think the colour outside the lines, I think there probably isn't a better way of ending the podcast than saying well-behaved women seldom change the world.
And they seldom make history. They don't.
No.
So
let's
take a cue from that.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for your time today and being interviewed today. I've really enjoyed it, and have learned even more about you and your story. And I know that our listeners are going to love your story and your learns and your pieces of advice that will get added into the book.
Thank you very much, Sam, for the opportunity to share my story, and thank you for making me think back, because I think looking back is one of the most powerful ways of crafting the future, and we don't do enough of that, so thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of A Beginner's Guide to Being a Grown-Up. If you enjoyed it, please like, follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If there's someone who inspires you that you'd like me to interview, you can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram and TikTok. In the meantime, enjoy being a grown-up.